If you want to understand not only what the planets are doing in your birth chart, but also how well they're doing it, then you need to understand Planetary Joy. Planetary Joy is an ancient Hellenistic system where the 7 traditional planets, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, are all strengthened in specific astrological houses where they have an affinity. And in fact, it's very likely that the connection between those 7 planets and those 7 houses actually informed some of the significations of those houses in the original house system. Now, because this is a traditional technique, we will be using the traditional whole sign house system for everything I'm going to be teaching you in this video. In whole sign houses, one sign occupies one house in its entirety, starting with the ascendant, which sets the tone for the entire birth chart. For example, if you are a Taurus rising, then Taurus occupies your first house, Gemini occupies your second house, Cancer occupies your third house, and so on and so forth. In addition to using whole sign houses, the system of Planetary Joy is going to be very different from the 12-letter alphabet system of signs, planets, and houses that many of you may have learned if you've been studying primarily modern Western astrology. And so if you've been taught that Aries is connected to the first house and that Mars is also associated with the first house, Taurus is the second house, Gemini is the third house, and so on and so forth, I need you to erase that from your memory, at least until we're finished with this video, because what we're talking about here is an entirely different system. But before we move on, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so you never miss an important astrology update. I post a new video every single Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, so you don't want to miss any of the upcoming tutorials, forecasts, or astrology videos that I'm going to be creating for you. And make sure you download your free Astrology 101 quick reference guide at the link down in the description below so you can figure out where your planets are in the houses and whole sign houses so you can follow along with this video. This is how you're going to discover where all of your planets are located, what they mean, and how it all fits together to start creating your own basic chart reading. This is also a very important reference guide for the energies of the signs, planets, houses, and aspects. So you always know what I'm talking about when I say any sort of astrological terminology in this video and in all of my videos here on YouTube. And finally, the entire reason I'm even thinking about Planetary Joy is because I just created a new lesson on this topic for my Cosmic Academy of Astrology, which is my full astrology course and program that takes you from the very basics and the foundations and learning how to put everything together to give a cohesive natal chart reading, all the way to making advanced predictions using transits, solar returns, lunar returns, annual perfections, monthly perfections, secondary progressions, and more. This is a full astrology program where you will learn everything you need to know to become a talented, attuned astrologer. You can learn more about the Cosmic Academy of Astrology down at the link below. And if you are a beginner, you are in luck. My Beginner's Astrology Bootcamp is launching a brand new live round in April, and you can join the waitlist right now. Enrollment actually opens on March 23rd of 2026, so you can get early enrollment. You can get started on the self-paced parts of this program that teaches you the signs, planets, and houses and how to put them all together before we dive into all of the live components. And then during the 2-week intensive, we're going to be diving into a bunch of additional workshops that help to explain the bigger picture framework of the systems that we're going to be teaching about the signs, planets, and houses. We're going to have live study group sessions that are interactive with our teaching assistants who are expert astrologers with years of wisdom and experience under their belts. This is something that you cannot get from AI. This is something that you cannot get from self-study. This is where you're going to get actual guidance and feedback on your interpretations in real time. We're also going to have plenty of Q&A calls along the way, so if you feel stuck or confused about any of the concepts we're teaching, you are going to be able to get unstuck very, very quickly. I'm super excited about this. We've never done this before for the boot camp. We do this for the academy, of course, but for the boot camp, this is a first, and we're doing this at a super discounted rate until the live events begin on April 13th. So check out that information down at the link in the description below if you're interested in that. All right, so now that you have a background in what Planetary Joy is and the systems that we're going to be using to interpret it, now that you have some additional resources to help find where your planets are located, located, and dive even deeper into astrology if that's something that you want to learn how to do. Let's get into which planets have their joy in which houses and what that actually means. I'm going to be breaking it down for you step by step because it's not as straightforward as it sounds. Not every planet that is in its joy is going to feel very joyful to the person experiencing it. And so that's something that we're going to dive even deeper into in just a moment. But for now, let's just stick with the concept of when a planet is in its joy, it is strengthened because it has an affinity or an association with the topics and themes that are attributed to the house that it falls in when it's rejoicing. And so Mercury rejoices in the first house, which is the house of the self. In traditional astrology, it's known as the helm, the house of life, or the ascendant. The moon rejoices in the third house, which is traditionally the house of the goddess, whereas the sun rejoices in the ninth house, which is traditionally the house of God. Venus, which is a benefic planet in traditional astrology, rejoices in the fifth house, which is the house of good fortune. And Jupiter, the other benefic planet in traditional astrology, rejoices in the 11th house, which is the house of good spirit. Now, the malefic planets rejoice in traditionally malefic houses, with Mars rejoicing in the sixth house, which is the house of bad fortune, and Saturn rejoicing in the 12th house, which is the house of bad spirit. Now, before we move on to the actual interpretations of each planet in the house where it rejoices, we need to cover a couple of additional traditional concepts. The first being benefic versus malefic planets. So in traditional astrology, the planets Venus and Jupiter, which even in modern astrology bring really positive, really harmonious, really beneficial and expansive energies. They bring luck and good fortune. These are considered the benefic planets. They have the ability to say yes, to pave the way, to create opportunity, and to bring about good luck and just good things in a person's life. Whereas the traditional malefic planets are Mars and Saturn. These planets have the ability to shoot things down, to say no, to create separation and discord, restriction, limitation, and challenge. We already know this from modern astrology, but in traditional astrology, they make it sound a little bit more dire. In traditional astrology, there's also this concept called sect, where the nature of the planets and the way they operate in your chart will shift depending on whether you were born during the day, having a diurnal chart, or born at night, having a nocturnal chart. And so the diurnal planets in traditional astrology are the sun, which is the light or the luminary that is associated with the daytime sect. That one makes sense, right? And also Jupiter, which is the benefic that's associated with the daytime sect. And so if you were born during the day, Jupiter is a stronger beneficial influence than the other benefic, which is Venus. The third daytime planet is Saturn. Because Saturn is a diurnal planet and it prefers to be in a daytime chart, Saturn becomes a little bit less malefic, a little bit less harsh. It's still not the nicest planet in your chart, but it's not the planet that has the ability to completely shut things down and create havoc in your life. It becomes a little bit nicer. On the flip side, the nocturnal planets are the moon, which is the luminary that's associated with the nocturnal sect. That makes sense, of course, because the moon is the light that shines at night. But we also have the planets Venus, which is the benefic planet that's connected to the nocturnal sect, which means that if you were born at night, Venus has a more benefic influence than Jupiter. It has a greater ability to create opportunity, harmony, good fortune, and all those wonderful positive Venusian things. Mars is also of the nocturnal sect. And so that means if you were born at night, then Mars is going to be less of a problematic influence than Saturn. Mars is still going to be Mars. It's still malefic. It still has the ability to create problems in its own way, but it's not as strong in its ability to completely wreak havoc or shut things down or create the worst types of challenges as Saturn will be. And so this is how sect works in traditional astrology. So why am I explaining all of this to you? Because in the Planetary Joy system, it's helpful to understand that the diurnal planets, which are the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, rejoice in houses that are above the horizon. They rejoice in the 9th, the 11th, and the 12th houses, whereas the nocturnal planets rejoice in houses that are below the horizon, which are the Moon, Venus, and Mars, and they rejoice in the 3rd, 5th and 6th houses. Now, Mercury is a neutral planet. It's not nocturnal, it's not diurnal. It kind of depends on other factors in the chart what it's doing. And so in the mythology, Mercury is the messenger god. He is able to transmit messages between worlds, between realities, between the living and the dead. And so it makes sense that Mercury would hold the position in Planetary Joy where it is literally transcending the boundaries between night and day. It's right there on the ascendant in the 1st house. The other reason I'm explaining these concepts is because the malefic planets and benefic planets function very differently when it comes to the way that they are strengthened when they are in the house of their joy, when they are rejoicing. So we know with certainty that the benefic planets are made more benefic when they are in the houses of their joy. That's partly because the houses of their joy are the 5th and the 11th houses, which are 2 of the 4 traditional benefic houses, where any planet placed there is made more benefic. It's made easier because it's in a sign-based positive aspect, either a sextile or a trine, with the ascendant of the chart. The malefics, on the other hand, Saturn and Mars, tend to be a source of confusion and controversy when it comes to planetary joy. And that's why I waited so long to create a lesson about this in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, because I wanted to give it a few years and a lot of trial and error just to double check and make sure that it was working in the way that I thought it was, because there is some confusion and discrepancy in the ancient text and also in the modern interpretations and uses of the malefics in Planetary Joy. Now, there are 3 different ways that you might hear other astrologers discussing Planetary Joy when it comes to the malefic planets when they are rejoicing. And these 3 ways of interpreting the malefic planets when they are in their joy are vastly different from one another. The first way to interpret this is that the malefic planets, when they are in their joy, become more malefic because they are in malefic houses that are associated with difficult topics and themes, and they are made more difficult when the malefic planets are sitting there. The reason the malefic planets rejoice in these malefic houses is because they're able to imbue the chart with their difficult significations a lot more easily. So even though these placements might not be experienced as joyful by the person who has these placements of the malefic planets in their joy in their natal chart, the malefic planets themselves rejoice because they are in a house that is aligned with their goals, their values, the things that they came here to imbue into the natal chart. They are able to carry out their malefic goals and say no to things and cause problems within the chart in a way that is easier and less inhibited. They have less obstacles to doing so. The second way to interpret the malefic planets in their joy, with Mars in the 6th house or Saturn in the 12th house, is that if these malefic planets are otherwise well situated, so if they are in the sign of their exaltation, if they're in the sign of their rulership, or if they are of the sect, so if you have Saturn in a day chart or Mars in a night chart, then these planets actually become less malefic when they rejoice. They imbue more benefits to the person whose chart this is. And so this is going to make sense because anytime the malefic planets are in the signs of their rulership or their exaltation, they're going to act a little bit more on our benefit. They're not going to be as harsh on us. And the same can be said when the malefic is of the sect of our chart. So if you're born during the day, you have Saturn, and if you're born during the night, you have Mars as the less malefic. And so it might be that astrologers have found this because of the other conditions present, not because they're enhanced somehow in a positive light for that person when they are in their joy. The third and probably most common thing that you're going to hear is that when the malefics are in their joy, that they are more benefic. They are less malefic overall. And this is the one that I have found to be the least accurate. And so part of the reason that some astrologers might say this is because even in the ancient texts, there was some debate about this. There were different ways of viewing the malefic planets when they were in their joy, but also in modern interpretation, some people just hear the word joy and they're like, oh, that planet's more joyful. Obviously, it's better. It's going to be enhanced in a way that benefits the person whose chart this is. And that's just not necessarily the case. And the reason I say that is because not only are there astrologers throughout history who have noticed that The malefics become a little bit harder to deal with when they are in their joy, but I have worked with thousands of charts, and I even have a malefic planet in its joy in my own chart, and I can tell you from experience that it's not a joyful experience. That these planets can become much more harsh and difficult to deal with when they are in their joy. And so I think the first method of interpretation is correct, but also you do have to look at the condition of that planet as a whole. So is it in its rulership? Is it in an elevated position where it's not going to be as harsh? Is it of the sect? Is it the opposite sect, right? Those are all things that you need to consider to understand how a malefic planet's going to be treating you in your birth chart, in addition to other factors like aspects it's making, like combustion or cazimi, like reception. There's just so many factors here. When you're looking at any planet and the way it's going to function in your chart, there is a whole spectrum of experiences. Just like in human life, there is a whole spectrum of experiences that we will have. Nothing is just black or white. Rarely do things work in these complete extremes. There's always a spectrum between good and bad, positive and negative, things that are experienced as joyful and things that are experienced as really deeply depressing and negative. And so most planets in our chart are going to fall somewhere along that spectrum and not completely on one end or the other. It's rare that it's going to operate only on one end or the other. And so it's reflected in the way that we interpret the birth chart. And obviously this is something that I teach in all of my courses. This is something that you're going to learn in the Beginner's Astrology Bootcamp and in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology. But I really wanted to drive that point home so you can understand that it's not black or white in that way. So now that we understand how the malefics work, how the benefics work, what about the neutral planets? Well, Mercury, the moon, and the sun are all considered neutral. They're not benefic, they're not malefic, they're just kind of there. And the way that they activate things in our chart depends on all of those other factors, all of those other influences, their condition and their placement. And when it comes to planetary joy, they seem to be enhanced usually in a more positive way, especially the moon and the sun, because the moon in the third house rejoicing and the sun in the ninth house rejoicing are in houses that are considered to be traditionally benefic, because once again, they make positive aspects to the ascendant sign by sign-based aspect by either a sextile or a trine. And so those energies will be enhanced and will be made more positive. Mercury seems to be the same because it will be more effective at the very least when it's in the first house, and it can help to overcome other obstacles that might inhibit its ability to function fully, like being in the sign of its detriment or the sign of its fall. And so that is how this kind of works with the strength. They're all strengthened, they're all enhanced, but you do have to look at it in the context of the chart and what it's doing overall. And now going back to each planet when it's in its joy, why does it have an affinity with this house? And what does it look like in actual practical interpretation in real life? So Mercury in the first house, which is again the house of life, the helm, the ascendant, is the house of self. It's the house of self-understanding. It's the house of the personality. It's also the house of personal perspective and how we encounter the world around us and process the information that we encounter in the world around us. And so Mercury in this placement is enhanced, and it makes a lot of sense. It can do these things a lot more freely. Now, the moon in the third house might seem odd if you've never studied traditional astrology, but in traditional astrology, the third house is the house of the goddess. And it doesn't just rule communication and siblings and all of those other things. It also rules our day-to-day rituals, our day-to-day religious practices, the things we do on a day-to-day basis to connect ourselves with a bigger purpose, something higher, that ninth house energy of God. And it's very much connected to our daily prayers. It's very much connected to those cycles and repetitive habits that we have every single day that connect us to something bigger and deeper. And that is very much the moon, because the moon rules rules habits and cycles and repetition. It rules our unconscious and conscious habits. And so I love that this is there. The moon is also connected to our memory. In medical astrology, it rules over the limbic system, which includes the hippocampus, which is responsible for episodic memory functions specifically, which is emotional memory and memory that is connected to real events, almost like we're playing them in our head like a movie. And so that third house connection there with memory makes a lot of sense as well. Venus having its joy in the fifth house also makes a lot of sense because Venus is joy. Venus in astrology shows us how we experience pleasure, and that is a very fifth house topic and theme. Traditionally, the fifth house is also associated with sex and procreation, which is another Venusian thing because Venus is all about relationships, especially romantic relationships, and we know that the fifth house is the house of romance. It's also the house of creativity, which is again another Venusian thing, and so all of this makes sense here. Venus shows us what we need to experience pleasure, how we experience pleasure, how we block ourselves from experiencing pleasure, and the fifth house is the house of joy. It's the house of creativity. It's the house of the things that bring us actual experiences of pleasure. And so Mars rejoices in the sixth house, which is the house of bad fortune. And so this is the house that's traditionally associated with illness and injury, which is a very Mars thing. It's also traditionally associated with servants and slaves. It's associated with open enemies in the traditional system, although in modern astrology and more recent years, we have shifted that over to the seventh house. I think that association with the sixth house makes sense though, especially in historical context, because your servants, your slaves, the people that are indebted to you are probably not going to love you. And so a lot of your enemies could probably stem from that house. Again, in traditional systems where slavery was a bigger issue. And Mars literally rules our opposition. It rules enemies. It rules arguments, disputes, disagreements. It rules injury, accidents, violence, all of these things. And so Mars rejoices in the sixth house because it's able to create more of those things. Now, that doesn't mean if you have Mars in the sixth house, you are completely doomed. Again, I have that myself. I've dealt with chronic illness. I've dealt with certain issues, but there are mitigating factors. You do have to look at Mars as a whole and what it's doing in your chart overall. And there are ways to work with the energy once you understand what the heck is going on there. So the sun rejoices in the ninth house, which is the house of God and higher wisdom, which again makes sense. The sun is our higher self. It's the soul's connection to its expression of purpose in physical reality. It's our spirit. And very literally, this is the house that's connected to spirit. It's connected to God. It's connected to a higher power. It's connected to religion. It's also our higher consciousness, and the sun rules our consciousness and our conscious awareness. And so all of these things make a lot of sense because the ninth house is our bigger picture belief systems. It's what we value. It's what we hold true when it comes to our ethical, moral, spiritual, religious value systems. It's our faith, and it's very much tied to our higher wisdom, as is the sun. Now, Jupiter in the 11th house of good spirit makes a little bit more sense when you look at it more traditionally. So in modern Western astrology, we talk a lot about the 11th house being friends, group associations, social networks. It's kind of groups of people, which is still the case. And obviously there's a lot of benefit to that, and you can have a lot of opportunity in connecting with allies. But more traditionally, there is an association with the 11th house and prosperity, abundance, wealth. And even in modern astrology, when you look at it through the lens of horary astrology or derivative houses, the 11th house is the wages we get from our career. It's the money that we bring in through our business. It does have a very tangible association with physical material wealth, but it's also good fortune overall. And so that 11th house connection to Jupiter starts to make sense when you start layering additional interpretations beyond just the modern Western approach. And then finally, Saturn rejoices in the 12th house, which is the house of bad spirit. This one to me makes the most sense because the 12th house is the house of isolation. It's the house of limitation, restriction. It's the house of confinement and exile. It literally ruled going into exile in traditional astrology. And even now it rules prisons, which are a source of confinement. So that's very literally Saturn, limitation, restriction, confinement, difficulty. It's also very solitary. And Saturn has this association with solitude and seclusion, which is very connected to the 12th house. And I've found with my clients who have Saturn in the 12th house, it's not a very joyful experience because they do have to go through these periods of solitude, seclusion, isolation that are sometimes brought from without, sometimes from within. It's sometimes a choice if Saturn is nicely placed, but if it's not, it does not feel good. This can also be associated with a lot of very strange challenges in a person's life. I've seen Saturn in the 12th house multiple times in the charts of clients who were associated with like literal cults. They were associated with some sort of cult, either by proxy or they joined a cult later on in life, didn't realize what was going on. Like that's a very weird specific thing that's only going to apply to a subset of people, but I've seen it enough where it's definitely a thing. Also, the 12th house is the house of hardship, sorrow, self-undoing. It's also the house of misery and loss, which are all Saturnian associations as well. And it is the house of unfortunate outcomes. And so having a malefic planet there makes sense because Saturn has an affinity for all of these topics and themes. Now, once again, if you have Saturn in your 12th house, it doesn't mean that you are doomed or that you're going to go join a cult. It just means that you have to work a little bit harder to navigate the energy of Saturn. And it's also probably not going to be the worst case scenario for most people because, again, everything runs on a spectrum. You have to look at the condition of Saturn as a whole, not just the fact that it's sitting in the 12th house, to fully understand how this will manifest in your life. All right, there you have it. Those are the planetary joys. Some are pretty joyful, others not so much. Let me know in the comment section below if you had any aha moments, if you have any planets in your chart that are in their joy and what your experience has been. And as always, make sure that you like the video, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend if you feel like they could benefit from the information I share with you today. If you're listening to this on any of the podcast platforms, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one, or maybe I'll see you in the live round of the Beginner's Astrology Bootcamp beginning April 13th of 2026. I hope to see you there. Bye, everyone.